and gentlemen, put your hands together for the foil project.
We're on. Hey, Reedie. How you going?
Good, man.
What are we doing right now? We're driving and we're heading up north. What's the plan?
Yeah, so the plan is to... Basically, it's a bit of a foil expedition. So we're going to aim to start at a place called Red Bluff in Quabba Station. So just up, I don't know how far it is north of Perth, maybe like 1,000 k's, something like that. Maybe slightly less. Going to start there and then hopefully over a period of the right weather window of days, going to try and get all the way to the tip of Exmouth.
Yes.
So that's the plan. We've got 2 cars, 4 foilers, 2 drivers.
Yep. It's going to be a bit of a foil expedition.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for people who don't know WA geography so well, it's pretty remote up there and there's not that many people along the coast, so we're bringing with us like safety equipment. We've got a satellite phone and Starlink too with the car, and yeah, the plan is to kind of, as Reedie said, jump in at Red Bluff and then make our way up in a couple downwind efforts towards Exmouth. I'll try and put a little map overlay as well, and so we can show you what the game plan is, but that's not what we're actually going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Reedie's other adventure that he did recently just off the Perth Metro Coast. So my experience of it was that I think I was working during the day. It was howling that day from like 6 a.m. in the morning. It was windy all the way through to the afternoon. And then I went for a little prone run down the afternoon with Riley Walker. And we came in, I opened up my phone to hop on one of the scooters to go back up the coast, flicked open Instagram quickly, clicked on Reedie's story and saw about half of WA with a foil track. So he'd gone from Bunbury up to Two Rocks.
Yeah, Yanchep. Yeah, just prior
to Two Rocks.
Yeah.
So basically on foil that was estimated to be about 250. Is that what we're thinking?
I'd say probably closer to the 240 mark. Yeah, unfortunately, my watch died partway along the journey at like about 150 k's, and the phone sort of glitched and did a straight track, and that showed 201 k's. But like actual distance should probably be close to around the 240 mark total.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Yeah. So your track showed about 200 k's, but we're thinking closer to 240.
Yeah.
Once you've done the cuts and the.
Yeah. So it's a bit tricky, but based on where the first 150 k's I'd done already up until halfway along Garden Island, and that showed my proper track. And then if you sort of, my phone showed the straight track, but like once you add in kind of the cutting left and right and all that sort of stuff and the traversing, it sort of adds up a fair bit. But the fact that the phone was actually recording it in straight lines, I had no intention of going that far that day. It was I was planning on stopping at my house, but once I'd got going, I kind of really wanted to see it tick over 200 k's. So that's sort of why I ended up where I did.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So do you want to just start? Like, what was your mindset for this? How long had you been thinking about doing something like this, and what was the plan going into the day?
Yeah. I guess, realistically, I've been thinking about this and semi-planning it for well over a year.
Yeah.
The exact location of start and finish, was always sort of a little bit up in the air, depending on weather. The tricky thing about it really was that ultimately, to get the right weather window was only really going to be possible for maybe, let's say, narrow it down to maybe 3 months of the year. And then the complicating factor was that, you know, because of the ribbon we get along that stretch of coast, like realistically, it has to be a really early season thing for us. So that probably really narrows it down to maybe about a 6-week window. So 12 months of thinking about it, it probably comes down to, in my mind, to do it solo and unsupported and kind of lower the risk. It really had to be done in about a 6-week window to try and get that right weather condition. Because like I need the wind to be good from, you know, and essentially blowing in the same direction from, you know, sunrise to sunset, and it's just not a normal weather pattern that we get here, you know, and so this really was the first day that it sort of did it basically in that time period.
Yeah, so also just so people know, this trip, you started at 6 a.m. basically, and you arrived at Yanchep at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So it's you need wind all day.
Yeah. So it was kind of, the initial thought was like I really would have loved to have done it from Bustleton Jetty. That was kind of the initial thought. But the wind that much further south just looked a little bit kind of sketchy. It would have been full offshore start. So just to kind of lower the risk and make it what seemed to be more achievable, decided to sort of start in Bunbury instead, and kind of worked out all right logistics-wise, because I was able to, you know, get a bus the next day back to the start location and then drive straight from there to a night shift in Bunbury. So,
wow.
So it kind of all fell into place, thankfully, but also thanks to my wife, Christina, for some of the logistics on that day as well. She sort of got a bit stitched up, really, but yeah.
So that morning, maybe the night before, what were you like looking for, and when did you decide this is actually going to happen? I'm gonna go and do this. Yeah,
I guess I knew really to make it to achieve what I wanted to achieve. I really had to be setting off by 7, 8 a.m. And if I wasn't doing that, then I would have foiled that day, but just not in that location. So that was the goal. And like the weather forecast looked pretty good almost from like a week out, and then just every day sort of solidified and just sort of got better and better. The day before is sort of really when I put all the planning in and sort of, I guess, or like sort of more or less pulled the trigger and decided I'm going to go down there, see what happens, be ready to go out in the water, by 5 a.m. I guess like where it got sort of interesting was, like I said, I did want to do this one solo and unsupported. And so just with that, carrying a lot of extra food, water, safety equipment. So, and also on a brand new board as well. So there was a lot of kind of unknown things there and a lot to sort of test out. And, so it was a few new things going on.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It was all about getting that ready kind of the day before, and then got down to the beach at about 5 a.m. that morning, set up, ready to go. Light was a bit dark still. It wasn't, not too much light at that point. And then looked out and I could see already that there was some bumps, like there was already some energy. So it was like, but decided to hold off until about sort of 6 a.m, looked even better. And then made the decision to give it a crack and jump on the water.
Cool. Okay, can I just quickly backtrack? What were you carrying in your packs? Like what stuff did you have on you? Safety equipment, water, food?
Yeah, okay. So I had 2 water. So I was foiling in like with a PFD on, as well as a mountain biking style camel pack where sort of a lot of the weight sits like really low on your back and then kind of clamps around your hips as well. So like you get to carry a lot of heavy stuff fairly low down. So the two work quite well together. So I carried 3 litres of electrolytes, 2.5 litres of water, 12 hours worth of food, mostly in the form of like bars and gels.
Yeah.
And then I had tourniquet, PLB, flares, phone, watch, tools, spare bolts. I think that was probably most of it.
Cool.
Some web gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like, at that stage your pack was probably pretty full. So what kind of weight do you think you had on your back compared to a normal run?
I'd say before it gets wet, I'd say it's probably up around kind of 8 kilos or so.
Yeah.
Once it gets wet, I'd say it's well over 10.
Yeah.
Even though they drain pretty well, like all the fabrics and stuff hold a bit of water and stuff. But honestly, it was like paddling up is definitely trickier.
Yeah.
It's harder. There's no doubt. I can't quite accelerate initially as fast, but once actually up on foil, it was okay. Like I noticed my sink rate was certainly a little bit faster, but it was like I didn't really get sore or anything like that. Like it kind of held the weight pretty well.
So probably the biggest thing with the paddle up would be your board. So can you tell us just about what's the normal board that you're riding in Perth runs? What board would you ride if you were traveling like somewhere else or doing this run without the pack on? And then what was the board that you were using with the pack on?
Sure. So like some of my previous long runs, I use I have been using a 7.6 by 16, and that's about 85 litres. And I tried that board prior to this trip with just trying to do some flat water paddle ups with 6 litres of water on board, and what I found was that board was completely underwater.
How much volume is that? Sorry.
So that's 85 litres.
85 litres.
Yeah. So like my day-to-day board is 80 litres.
Yeah.
That I made because it was a race board, like 5 litres more, and that was still underwater. So then decided to make that new board, which is 100 litres.
100 litres, cool.
Yeah. So really with this sort of stuff in mind, and carrying that extra weight. And yeah, it did so. Like it worked super well. It still probably sunk a bit more than I was anticipating, but but it's fine. It's doable. It's and it's still kind of in the ballpark of what I like to, be up and riding on.
Yeah.
Once it's up in the air as well. So
cool. Okay, so do you want to just bring us back to when you jumped in the water and starting in Bunbury?
Yeah. So paddled out. So I guess conditions of the day, the previous few days had been pretty windy as well. So there were some like residual kind of leftover bumps traveling from sort of south to north, which, direction I'm going. The wind itself was cross offshore and probably only like maybe 10 knots when I jumped in the water. But knew it was going to build. And I could see that there was energy out there moving the right way. So anyway, paddled out, and to be honest, I probably only paddled like 20, 30 meters offshore.
Really?
Yeah, and then managed to sort of paddle up and sort of get going. And within 5 Ks, I was barely working.
Okay.
And then within 10 Ks, my mindset had gone from because the concern is always going to be that it's like going to be really light at the start of the day. You're going to cook yourself, and then you're really going to pay the price at the end of the day,
Yeah.
So whereas like my mindset on this one quickly changed into, oh my God, if it's this size at 6:30 a.m, like
how big is it going to be in the afternoon?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that was definitely that was on the forefront of my mind. I was gear wise, I was riding the 770R, 75 plus mast, medium fuse, and a 120 tail, and that's different for everyone. But that's a setup I would, I guess, rarely use locally over 10, 12 knots. So it was like. So yeah, I knew what the forecast was going to do later on, so it was definitely made me nervous thinking about how things might go later on, for sure.
Yeah. So by that 10K mark, how big were the bumps out there?
At the 10K mark, probably still not huge, like maybe only kind of, knee to waist high, but you could just see that it just looked angry, right? It just kind of looks and there was a bit going on, multiple directions, lots of energy out there. And, if you made good decisions, it was effortless. You're just placing your board in the right spots. But yeah, it was getting way windier way earlier than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the coastline around that area? What was it? What did it look like? Was it what you expected it to be?
Yeah, it kind of was. Yeah, so looking wise, the coastline, I was a reasonable distance sort of offshore, and I kind of like I fly that for work, fly that section of coast pretty often, so I'm like pretty familiar with like a lot of the landmarks and stuff there. Probably the thing that was most surprising for me really was that for a lot of that stretch between sort of Bunbury and Dawesville, there was actually, especially once it got past Mile Up and those areas, there was probably at least 3, maybe 4 really distinctly different directions of bumps, and I really wasn't expecting that. There just wasn't really a good reason for it, but they varied from either straight west, straight east, south, or there was also like a bit of a southwest one as well.
Wow.
So it was it was just a little bit more, I suppose, taxing in decision making and kind of manoeuvring necessarily than pumping. Obviously, if you made a bad decision, you might be doing a bit of pumping, but I probably wasn't really expecting that from that section of coast. There was no real obvious, geographical features that made me think that would be the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, for that first section, maybe 100 Ks, it was like it actually just progressively got more and more confused with bumps coming from some really varied directions. Yeah.
So chaotic. You're kind of getting like bumps coming from all different angles and like wedging up against each other.
Yeah.
How was the weed situation at that stage?
It was pretty good. There was definitely patches where it was sort of getting better and worse. But it was mostly the big kind of fluffy stuff. So I definitely had to stop a few times, and they were sort of a lot of those ones that the size of basketballs and stuff. So like if you hit it, you're gonna a few times it just went flying, and it just sort of stops you dead, and you just go flying.
Yeah.
So that certainly happened a few times, but as far as a ribbon weed goes, for that section, it was basically as good as I think it probably ever gets.
Yeah. And so you just said this is about the first 100 Ks that you did? What you're describing now?
Yeah.
How about, can we just quickly backtrack and talk about, you said you fly over that area often.
Yeah.
For people who don't know you, what's your job and why are you flying over those areas?
Yeah, so I work as a critical care paramedic on rescue helicopter.
Yeah.
For the state, and yeah.
Cool. So you've seen like lots of that coastline already and before.
Yeah, it's so I work out of Jandakot Airport or Bunbury Airport, and that services, depending on their cases, about a 250k radius of each of those bases, and then predominantly we're going out and landing on scene of motor vehicle accidents or farming accidents or industrial accidents or like a lot of primary trauma, and then flying those patients back to state trauma centres, either Royal Perth or Perth Children's Hospital.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so from there you've done the first 100 Ks. Did things start to change after that, or was there like a distinct change in the water or a gradual change?
Yeah, there was. So that section I'd never done before. That was all kind of completely new to me, which was awesome. Like that was kind of the whole point of the day, is to see new things and experience sort of new places. And then I got to Dawesville. Now Dawesville was the start of a run that I did maybe a year, just about over a year ago. Yeah. So basically then you start the cut or the half cut run.
Yeah.
But you kind of take it a little bit wider for Garden Island and stuff. But it's so interesting. I went around. So by the time I got to kind of just prior to Dawesville, it was big. Like it was, pushing towards some of the biggest conditions I'd sort of been in. Like head and a half, maybe not quite double overhead at this stage, but with those full distinct different directions. Yeah. And then it hit Dawesville, and it was amazing. It dropped a fair bit in size, but then completely all lined up like Dawesville does. basically lined up with just kind of shoulder high walls.
Wow.
Yeah, just one after the other. It was sick. It was really good. But yeah, so it all went one direction. It's basically like the perfect kind of jacked bay run. It was mental.
Yeah.
But these walls just go for hundreds of meters. So yeah, that was sick. It got me really excited. So we've gone round into Dawesville, and then it's just completely sort of walled up. Basically, for that whole half cut run was that just progressively getting bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So I just want to touch on, like, when you were in those big bumps and you were feeling really overpowered, maybe a lot of the time, were you pulling off a lot, or what was the strategy to kind of cope with that? And then how did that change as you went into the cut?
Yeah, so I was basically completely safety surfing. So trying to minimise. It was the sort of conditions that, like, you know, if I had have been on, you know, not carrying the extra weight and not carrying, and maybe on a foil I'm more familiar with, I think, you know, like this, basically probably for 80 Ks of that 100 Ks, like it would have been quite comfortable doing sub 2 minute kilometres. Like, that's kind of what we're talking.
Yeah. But were you doing, what kind of kilometres times were you doing?
It's I'd have to go back and check. Probably closer to around the sort of the 2:15s and it's basically because, you know, at least once or twice every kilometre I would have to pull off, essentially. Yeah. Pull off and turn and glide back down onto another one just to wash off some speed essentially. And look, at the end of the day, it's not because of the foil. It's because I don't really spend any time on those foils on a board that I had only just kind of flat water paddled once, and that was it. Like, it was
so
kind
of
of
your first time using that board in the ocean.
Which I don't know if that was the smartest thing, but anyway, it
well,
kind of turned out okay.
You got 12 hours of board time by the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah,
it's more than most people get, like, over weeks.
Yeah.
So
no, it definitely made me a bit more comfortable with it. But yeah, I was totally safety surfing. Yeah.
Can I just ask, mast positioning, were you worried at all where you put it on the board?
Well, that's why I took it flat water paddling, and I also had a tool on me as well, so a pretty low threshold to change it around if I needed to. But it felt pretty good, and that was the other reason as well why I made it the same length as my other 7.6, because I just know
you knew it.
Kind of where that needs to sit. So for me,
awesome. Okay, so you got now the cut. Like, what was your strategy there? Were you having to pull off the back much there? You can now just sort of rest and...
So for the half cut, it was epic. It was super comfortable, like a good size, a good speed, and just like full, you know, for me, efficiency foiling, you know, just kind of gliding and just enjoying it. But after a while, it didn't take too long to go from that like half cut to the full cut section. Like, it got pretty wild again. Still in like mostly one direction, but it just got huge. By the time I sort of was like well out the back of sort of Secret Harbour and that sort of area, like, it was definitely, you know, well over double overhead. Wow. Yeah. Like,
double overhead. Yeah, like, so you were going down the back of bumps and like looking up the ones behind you.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, it was sick. It was probably not quite as big as the Cape to Cape.
Yeah.
But it was close. It was, wow. Yeah, it was pretty wild. And super windy. Like, it was already like
honking.
Yeah, so probably by 10, 11 a.m. it was already over 25 knots.
Wow.
Like, it was,
Yeah, so at that stage again, you were starting to pull off the back of things, and
Basically, the only time I wasn't was about the first like 10 Ks I wasn't, and then for about 10 Ks off Dawesville I wasn't, and then the rest of the time was
you were just pulling off.
Pull off. Yeah.
In reflection, would you have taken a smaller foil?
Oh man, 600R.
Yeah. Sick. Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And you think, would that have made it easier, you reckon, overall?
100% for me. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
But the thing, like, but you can't rely on that, right? Like,
not at all. Well,
that turned into the day of days as far as like the amount of energy out there, but like to kind of
pull that out at the start is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be a crazy move. Yeah. And it was sick. Like, it kind of, by the end of the day, like, I was controlling that foil much better than I was at the start of the day, getting much more comfortable on it. So it was like, it was such a sick way to, I don't know, get some skills that I didn't have. Like, it was cool.
So just how many times do you reckon you fell off from the start to the end of the cut?
Ooh, I'd say maybe, I don't know, it'd be on my watch. Maybe like, I'd say maybe like just 7 or 8.
Okay, so not many times at all, really, for how far you've foiled already.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I'm probably at like maybe 120 Ks or something like that. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe not that many. Maybe like 5 or 6 or something. Okay. Like stopping for weed and fell maybe twice or 2 or 3 times. Something.
So most of the time you're just stopping to get a bit of weed off or having
crash because of hitting a chunk of weed. Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, a few times, but like that was mostly pretty good. Yeah.
And then paddling up, I assume, was probably pretty easy with that wind and the 770.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was definitely a bit trickier in that Dawesville section where there was multiple kind of angles going on, or like prior to that Dawesville section. But otherwise it was fine. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so after the cut, what happened? What happened from there?
So after that section, like the conditions were definitely still like really ramping up. It was still getting bigger. It was still getting windier.
I just want to, for anyone like one who didn't see that forecast that day, basically the arrows looked like this. They just kind of started gradually and then just ramped up throughout the whole day. Yeah. I've never really seen. We've had 2 days this year. Actually, we had one just a couple of weeks back when all the East Coast crew were here for the races, which might have been even windier.
I think it was, it was but another wild day. I think the weed could have been worse that day though, so I'm kind of grateful. But yeah, so it was just, so what I was kind of thinking was, I kind of talked about it in that video, but the audio sucks, so you can't really hear it, but like, what crossed my mind is maybe I angle and go inside of Garden Island and go through, like, basically from Rockingham to Woodman Point, like through the full sound.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be windy enough for it, and I thought, like, it's just a good way to punch out some kilometres and, like, kind of not be fully overfoiled and, like, holding on for dear life for a big chunk. Like, I was definitely worried about how big it was going to be behind Garden Island. But thankfully I didn't, because I know some crew went there like the week earlier and said it was like the most weed that they'd ever seen. So I'm really grateful I didn't make that decision. But so I kind of ended up going, nah, I knew I would kind of regret not knowing what it was like at the back of Garden Island again, especially because last time I did it, like, that was my favourite part of the run. It was epic, and I kind of was like, well, like, it's a pretty epic day, so I kind of want to know again what it was like out there that day. So yeah, made the decision to go around Garden Island again, and I'm glad I did, because it was kind of like, I mean, it wasn't kind of the blue sky day that I remember from the previous time, and couldn't see all the reefs and stuff, but it was still epic. It was, it does a similar thing to what Dawesville does for that half cut run, but basically it all stacks right up and you just get these huge long walls.
Sick.
Yeah, all the way, basically for the full length of Garden Island, which is it's a decent distance. So
maybe
epic.
Maybe an appropriate question to ask now is, what was your favourite stretch? Was that your favourite stretch of the run, or was the first bit of the cut better?
Nah, I think it was still probably that Garden Island section. It was massive. It was like all the energy was still going in one direction, so it was kind of super easy to read, and you could kind of take a bit more risk. But yeah, just the walls, like when you've just got, like, it's almost like prone foiling, right? Like you've just got like one wave that you can just go down the line for like a kilometre or whatever. So cool. Probably not that long, but like, yeah, it's so good. And then come back the other way and just cover some serious distance. The only thing about that spot though was there's a lot of cray pots behind there.
Yeah, I heard you talking about that.
Yeah, actually. And that was I didn't hit any, but like got within centimetres of
wow.
them. But because of the the size of the bumps and stuff, you didn't really see them until you're
right on top of them. Yeah.
So,
and were they getting like pulled underwater as well? Like with those
they were
big
disappearing.
swells rolling through?
You'd only see them kind of in the troughs. So yeah.
How is like how comfortable were you feeling out there? Once you're around the back of Garden Island, you're kind of a long way off the mainland. Were you still feeling pretty like safe and in control?
Yeah, I was. I think. I think a lot of people saw my track and got like, you know, like, and certainly get a bit concerned. The thing, like, and there's no doubt, like, it's risky doing this solo and unsupported. But like, there's just lots of, a lot of preparation went into it. Like, I had lots of different safety equipment on me and lots of contingency plans in place. And then, like, the other thing, like, my thing has always been, don't go further than offshore than I'm willing to prone paddle in, essentially. Like, and so I look at that, and I was probably no more than, say, 15 kilometres offshore at any one point. And yeah, a lot of people would kind of say, well, that's crazy. It's like, well, yeah, but like,
you could prone paddle that.
You absolutely could. Like, and like, I know the currents out there. I know we have very stable and predictable winds. Like, I see the risk is pretty low. You know, even if something was to happen and I had to prone paddle in at night time, yeah, that's going to be uncomfortable. But like, there's only one direction that you're going to go, and like, yeah, it might be a really shitty 6 hours or whatever it's going to be. But like, you know, like I don't really consider that to be like super dangerous. Like, it's.
What do you think gives you this mindset? Because obviously I don't think that's a mindset that many people would have. That idea that like you're willing to paddle 15Ks. If all went wrong, you'd probably come in and you'd still be like happy with the result, I guess, even if you did have to paddle 15Ks. Like, does it come from the job that you've done or like past experiences?
Maybe. It's a good question. Because things don't completely go to plan, like, well, that is a plan. It's not not the original plan, but like, okay, let's say all of a sudden, you know, something happens, I lose my paddle, I can't get up on foil. It's like, well, do I have the water, the fuel, and the resources to paddle myself in for, you know, the next 4 hours, 5 hours? Like, well, yeah, I do. Like, is my life going to be in danger? Like, no, it's going to suck, but it's like, but it's not. But I don't see it as like a life-threatening event. Now, obviously, if it did turn into something like that, then like then I've got my PLB, I've got my phone, I've got phone reception that entire run. Like, I've got other contingencies in place, but it's like, but I have plans to, you know, be able to self-rescue, have people on standby, all that sort of stuff. So like, I kind of like, when you play out all these worst case sort of scenarios or everything in between and have sort of, you know, some plans for them, it's not, you know, again, like, for that whole day, I took 5.5 litres of water. I drank 2.5 litres. Like, I carry that amount of water because I need to plan for contingencies and stuff. So it's kind of, it's all just sort of part of it. Like, that's the stuff I love, is all that sort of planning and.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right, so we've gone Garden Island. Now, I reckon for me, this is the part, like the craziest part of the whole trip for you, is when you cut in around the back of Garden Island, and the geography there's kind of Garden, and then there's Karnak Island as well. Yeah. And then kind of in between them, there's lots of little rocks, I guess. And you cut in between. So, what was that like? Okay, so I don't reckon that was my smartest decision. Okay, so the idea behind it really was that if I could fairly sharply cut right behind Garden Island and then get into some of those bumps from Coburn Sound, I thought that was just going to be like a real cruisy run through. And the thing was, like, in that strip there, you've got, because of the way the bumps go, you've got bumps going through Garden Island, like in Coburn Sound, then you've got bumps, you know, parallel to Garden Island. But what happens is those bumps run alongside, and then when they, you know, the end of that island happens, they wrap. So you've got like some pretty crazy angles that sort of happen there. Yeah. And I remember this from the previous run.
And I knew I wanted to get through that craziness like really quickly. I didn't want to prolong it. So that meant that either I stayed really wide for a really long time or I cut very hard and tried to get it all over and done with really quickly. So yeah, I did cut between Garden and Carnac Island, and yes, there's some very shallow reefs in there. I didn't come unstuck, but it was a lot shallower than I thought it was going to be in certain sections.
Yeah.
And then the bumps got crazy. As in all angles. All angles, yeah. They're coming kind of almost at 180, like completely from the west, completely from the right, like from the east. It wasn't too tricky to read, but you couldn't necessarily adjust your line fast enough. Like you've either got a wingtip out or your board's underwater. Like it's kind of just a bit crazy and messed up. But
would you have gone a longer mast for that section? Is that?
Oh, for that section, that'd be amazing. Yeah. I guess it's just kind of what I'm used to. I just only really use the 75. But yeah, for that section would have been amazing. Like you definitely could have ridden it a lot more efficiently. But yeah, so and then cut fairly hard towards kind of Woodman Point and kind of the Perth mainland section. Yeah. And then sort of straightened up for the normal kind of coastal run that we do.
Yeah. So at this stage, you've kind of gone through there and then you ended up quite close to the coast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you stick close to the... Actually, I remember hearing the story. So you went past like Fremantle, I guess. Yeah. And apparently you went past Jack McKinnon sitting in the water out there.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think he was having the best day. Sorry, Jack, if I interrupted that, mate. It was definitely it was a tricky day. But I sat down and made a quick phone call to Christina. Yeah. Just to try and sort out some logistics for pickup. I think at that point I told her, maybe kind of shooting for Ocean Reef or something like that. Maybe like a little bit past Sorrento was sort of the agreed plan. But it was still pretty early. It was like, it would have been like, I don't know, maybe like 1 o'clock or 1:30 or something.
And at this stage, you've probably done about 150. Is that right? Or
well, I'd done 150 halfway around Garden Island.
Wow. Okay, so it's probably getting closer to like 180, maybe.
Probably. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Cool. So from there, do you want to just describe the coastal run?
Yeah, it was big. It was some of the biggest I've seen along that section again. Like it was a big day. Kind of similar to the one that we just had on Monday. Similar sort of size. I was probably out a bit wider because I knew I was going to have to go around Hillary's again. The weed at this stage was probably starting to get like a little bit worse. Like our local run, there was a little bit more weed than I'd previously had for the rest of the run. And it was kind of at this point as well that my watch had died. It was at this point as well that I was kind of looking at my phone and it was sort of giving me the readouts of how much further I had to go. And I was like, this doesn't seem right. Like it kind of, I sort of knew what speed I was doing and like kind of familiar with distances and stuff. And I just like...
You're like, I've gone further than...
Yeah, but it's like... Yeah, anyway, so I was like kind of in my head already going, well, there's like lots more sunlight, so I guess I'll just see how far I get. But like, but like I said, the plan was to just kind of foil home, and I'd kind of calculated that out that it would be probably pretty close to 200. Yeah. But then once I'd kind of got going, I was like, nah, I really want to see this tick over 200. But yeah.
How was the body feeling at this stage?
It was kind of fine. I was probably starting to stiffen up a little bit, but it really, because of the day that it was I really wasn't pumping much. Paddling up wasn't super tricky. It was mostly just having to stay on top of it as far as just kind of decision making and, not bombing too many or whatever it was. But no, I was like still feeling fine and like keeping up or trying to keep up with kind of, food and hydration. But I really I genuinely was not working hard. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
So I'm more just considering at this stage you've probably been on your feet for about 7 hours or 8 hours.
Yeah.
How was there a specific part that was sore or you were ignoring it? Like were your feet sore from standing on the board for that long?
Not really. I was able to kind of play around with my stance a little bit and just if you kind of like just periodically kind of move things, check things, like think about things, and just sort of go through all your different sort of body parts that might be like kind of getting sore or getting more fatigued. I probably noticed like my neck was getting like a little bit sore at this stage, but like...
Is that just from looking over like your left shoulder?
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm not too sure, but...
It's just, I just don't think anyone's really been on, or not many people have been on foil for that long. So, yeah, it's cool then. Cool, okay, so we've gone, now you've made it to Hillary's, and there's sort of, at Hillary's there's these outer reefs. So did you go inside or outside? Yeah, so I was inside those reefs. So at this stage now we're talking like it's probably well over 30 knots. Yeah. It's been blowing for many, many hours. The bumps are huge. It's traveling in a perfect direction as far as like the wind bumps go, and not a huge amount of swell. So like it's kind of, I sort of made the decision, I'll go inside the reefs because I think there's still going to be plenty of energy kind of traveling through between them. And I don't know that that was the right decision in hindsight. Basically, after Hillary's, the weed got horrendous. It sucked. That last kind of stretch, I don't know what it would be, like maybe 40 Ks or something like that, was like far harder than the rest of it. Yeah, right. Like far harder. And it was a combination of things. It was at different points, what was happening was the swell or the wind bumps, whatever they were hitting these outer reefs, then squaring up to shore and then coming at me at 90, as well as the wind bumps coming through, in their usual direction. So that was part of it, which probably would have been fine if I didn't have, foil completely covered in weed. But there was sections of that run where, I would have to, let's say for every kind of 5 attempts at paddling up, only one of them would I be able to actually get up because my foil has accumulated too much weed to even get on foil. While you were sitting down. Yeah. Oh my God, that's hectic. So you got to kind of pull off fistfuls and stuff like that and hope that you get, kind of get clear of it. So there were sections of that where I was kind of only foiling, 50, 100 meters at a time. Have to stop and come down. So at this stage now, so leading up to maybe getting to Hillary's, you'd probably come down 20 times or something like that over the total run, or maybe even less? Yeah, probably less, yeah. And then after that stage, how many times do you reckon you paddled up again? I don't know if my phone would have tracked that. Just from that section alone, I'd have to say probably over 30, maybe. Wow. 40. Yeah. Far out. It was a lot. Yeah, that's intense. That did more damage than the rest of it, that's for sure. So at this stage, like, did you start feeling some proper fatigue then once you started paddling up, or you were sort of like, making sure that you sat down and waited out the... Yeah, not really, because at this stage, it was just kind of a slow grind. I was probably getting more frustrated, and I really, at this point, had to make sure that I was kind of just maintaining eating food and, sort of, just trying to sort of stay hydrated and all that. But it's, but no, like I was still feeling pretty good at this stage, like, because if you're going to fall off your board, like, I'm not fighting it at this stage. I just fall in and climb back on, like it's kind of, this part definitely was a bit more fatiguing for sure. Yeah. How about mentally? Like, where was your head at this stage? It was still pretty good. Like, I knew I still really wanted to... The thing was, I kind of wanted to tick over that 200 Ks on my phone. Yeah, and but I'm also now starting to get out of the metro area where access to me becomes an issue. Yeah. Like, and as well, like, you don't, like, with some of the seaweed that we get here, like, I don't know, I could have hit a wall of it at any point that, like, you just couldn't actually get through. Like, so that starts kind of playing on your mind a little bit as well. But, like, I was still feeling good, and I still knew I had, a bit of sunlight and stuff to get it done. I was definitely a bit frustrated with the fact that I could see on my phone that I'm like, I'm sure this is under reading. But anyway, it was kind of... Which it never started as a thing. Like, there was no real kind of set goal for that. It was more about from one location to another location. But I think that's kind of, when you're up and going, that's kind of the metric that you're probably focusing on, or like at least I was at that time. Yeah.
But
I can understand that, really wanting to tick over the 200k. That's
it, like I said, it wasn't the goal for the day, but it was like.
But it maybe became it.
But it did become it. Like once I was out there, that was the thing I was kind of working for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. How about coming in? What was it like coming in at Yanchep?
Yeah, it was cool. Like again, that whole section from like Hillary's to Yanchep, I've never done on foil.
Yeah.
And after that last run, I'll happily never do again.
It's quite a lot of like sand dunes and things. Is that?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of cool because it sort of it like traversed a few places, you know, a few previous houses and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where I grew up and like I actually grew up in Yanchep, so
right.
I kind of came in on the beach that like, you know, for 10 or so years of my life, like grew up playing
cool.
on. Yeah, which was rad. Like it was super cool. Like I literally came in on the beach and sort of walked up, you know, like could see my old house and all that sort of stuff.
Sweet.
So, yeah, it was pretty sick. So that was a pretty cool feeling, like kind of coming on the beach and, you know.
Where you grew up, that's awesome actually.
Yeah.
And how were you feeling then? Like what emotions did you feel when you come in? Was it relief or, I don't know, like gratitude? I'm not sure. What were you?
Yeah, I'm not sure really how much I think a lot of the processing kind of came in the days after. I was like, definitely gratitude. Like I was super lucky to, you know, be around when this sport existed.
Yeah.
And then
as we are all.
But then also, you know, lucky enough that you know, I could have the time to do it, and that, you know, my wife could come and pick me up, and that my kids were happy to see me. Like, just grateful for a lot of things. It kind of, it's sort of, it's, yeah, so like a big part of why I wanted to do it was because, with some previous experience with the adventure racing stuff like we're talking about, like,
yeah. So I think we talked about that before we started.
Right.
But Reedie's had some past experience with adventure racing, like bikes and running on foot. Yeah, so I used to love doing like expedition style adventure races, and hopefully one day I'll get back there when time is, you know, a bit more abundant. But on these, the thing that I really value about these races is something that sort of happens during and after, and that is like often they're the most, you know, physically demanding things that I've ever done, but also some of the most like mentally challenging as well. And so like you get these amazing highs and lows, and then you kind of just continue to sort of push through it day after day after day. And just at the end of it, like you're just kind of left with this experience that you sort of reflect on, that you can kind of take into everyday life. And you might be met with a challenge at work or whatever it is, and I just literally for, you know, periods of months and months, I can kind of reflect on these things and go, yeah, well, this is hard, but like it's not that
in my head, it's not as hard as that time.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so like it just gave me this amazing kind of reset of like being super grateful for really small things, and like just understanding, you know, what it is to really kind of push yourself a bit. And doing this foil trip was like a really big part. That was what I was trying to get.
Yeah.
And I don't think I really quite got it.
Okay. Yeah, I actually remember hearing you talk about this, and that's probably what I'm most interested to hear about, actually.
Yeah, I think it's totally possible to get. And don't get me wrong, like I'm not trying to play this off and say it was super easy or but at all. Like it wasn't. I got very lucky with the day that I chose. And, you know, doing this on the wrong day for me would be completely impossible, you know, so that's like the whole other end of the spectrum. But it's like, but I don't think on this day with what I did, it really quite scratched that itch, like, for lack of a better term. Like it's kind of, it was good and it was hard, and it definitely, you know, it challenged me at different points, but it probably didn't quite tick that box that I was sort of hoping to tick, I guess.
So what what do you think it missed that didn't allow it to tick the box? Was it just not hard enough, or?
I think, as strange as this sounds, I think it's not probably long enough.
Right.
As in, it might be something that I can only maybe feel over consecutive days and nights or whatever. It's kind of, I do wonder whether or not that's a factor, because at the end of the day, I can kind of tell myself, I can look at my watch and say, well, in 4 hours, this all stops. It's kind of, whereas that's...
With the adventure races, it was different. It was more like a week-long thing. Is that right? Or how?
Yeah, they generally would run for anywhere between 6 and 10 days and 24 hours a day, and you choose when to sleep and how to fuel yourself and all that sort of stuff. So I think fatigue and managing all those different things kind of play into it maybe a little bit.
How about the other thing I remember you mentioning is when you used to do those events, it'd be with maybe like a group of 4 people. Or a group of people.
Yeah.
Is that something you missed as well? Or
100%. Yeah, totally. I think the amazing thing about doing it in a team like that is that inevitably, not everyone can be feeling tip top all the time. Yeah. And you have to in a team environment like that, you have to rely on each other. One, there's got to be complete trust there. But 2, when you're feeling awesome, I might need you to get me out of the funk, it's kind of, so that's, it's a really cool aspect of that sport, but fortunately we get it in foiling too. It's really important to kind of have a team there that, 1, recognises what's going on within the team, and 2, helping each other, through the kind of the highs and lows of it all.
Yeah. So now you've finished, you've come in, what happened after that? Were you waiting?
Yeah, so I was starting to get a bit cold. So I called up Christina and said, oh, well, you know how I said I was going to finish at Ocean Reef? I didn't. I finished in Yanchep, and she wasn't stoked with that because it's about another 45-minute drive further north.
Yeah.
Anyway, fortunately for me, she loaded the kids in the car and came and picked me up and brought warm blankets, and I was super grateful. Nice. Yeah. So I kind of just disassembled my gear and sat down at the surf club and got out of the wind and just sort of tried to keep warm.
Yeah. On that, warmth while you're doing these things, do you think is getting cold something that you see to be a risk while doing these, or
definitely because it wasn't a particularly warm day. It wasn't our normal sea breeze summer weather pattern day. So ambient temps were a bit cooler anyway.
It was probably around 24 or something like that, or maybe a little less.
Maybe at the peak, maybe a max, but and water temp, I don't know where we're at the moment. Maybe 20 degrees, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is at some point you kind of fall in, and then you're getting kind of the wind evaporative cooling going on.
Yeah, evaporative cooling is a big thing.
As you go. But the problem is because it was the conditions that it was, I'm not really working hard. So I'm not kind of, generating my own heat. So it's pretty easy to kind of cool right down. Look, I've found the trick, just things that I can kind of layer and as I go. A big thing is kind of having the ability to kind of cover your head and neck and all that sort of stuff. But also, I can kind of heat up fairly quickly just by putting something around my head, my neck, a hood, a hat, all that sort of stuff. And then equally, I can cool off fairly quickly by, pulling the hood back, lifting the hat up a bit. There's ways that I can kind of play around with it. But so far in my experience, certainly for local runs, being cold is much more of a risk than being hot.
Yeah. So if you're going to do it again, would you wear more warmth?
Probably slightly, yeah.
Would a wetsuit top or something be the thing that...
I don't know if I could do neoprene so much, but maybe a slightly warmer sort of jersey or something, because again, it's variable on the day, but there's a very real chance that I could have kind of cooked myself for the first half of the day, based on that forecast. Like I still could have been working very hard for quite a few hours, and you've got to carry all that gear, and overheating overheating is definitely a concern as well if the conditions are really light and you're having to work hard early on.
How about, so the days after it, like, have we kind of already talked about your thought process, or what were you thinking once you finished this day-long trip? I was like, in some ways there was a bit of kind of relief. I mean, because I'd been sort of looking at trying to do something similar for a long time. So I was kind of glad to have sort of done it and just see what, like, kind of gauge out, one, just to see, you know, what I could get away with as far as what I could carry, how the board would react, just all those sorts of things. Like, I think probably, like, one of the coolest things that, like, I've taken away from the whole experience really isn't about that experience itself. It just makes me wonder what is actually possible, essentially. Like, I think, like, you know, I want, like, one, I think in the right conditions, like, 300 Ks is 100% possible in 12 hours. I mean, the fact that you probably got close to 250 and you had a crazy mare with weed at the end makes me think that in those conditions, if you had no weed, you probably would have got there, right?
Yeah, I think I'd worked out that I'd done 200 Ks by about 2:30 or something like that. Yeah. So,
so keeping that rate, you would have made it before sunset, right? Or just
potentially, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It kind of didn't happen, but do I think that it's possible for someone? Totally, I do. And then I guess the other thing that it sort of leans into as well is just seeing what might potentially be possible as far as, like, you know, when all of a sudden you can kind of carry gear and foil distances, well, like, now we're talking about expeditions. Hence the drive. Yeah. Okay, I guess maybe one of my final questions is how does this trip play into your thoughts about that 200k run you did, the 250k run you did? Did that feel like preparation for this, or are they two completely different things? Okay, so they're different and they're related. I think part of and this is kind of more down to knowing my personality and stuff. I was very grateful to get that other one done, because this is a very different trip in my eyes. Like, this is like fully about the journey and the experience, and whereas the other one was a lot more about kind of pushing myself and seeing kind of what's possible. And the danger is, like, having done lots of kind of team stuff in the past, is you want to make sure that everyone's goals are pretty aligned, right? Yeah. Like, because if I came into this expedition with the goal of I want to make this really difficult and really hard and push myself to the absolute limit, I'm pretty sure you guys aren't going to be mates with me at the end of the trip. So that was my goal for the other one, and I have to keep that in check. Like, I don't need to make things hard for the sake of them being hard on a trip as epic as this. So it's like, so I'm kind of glad I got that out the way, because that means that I'm less likely to have any of those sort of tendencies on a trip like this.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I had a really good question. I've lost it.
You've got 10 hours to think about it. Yeah,
we can just keep waiting. Hey, just cut it the clip here and then we'll find it. Damn, I hate when that happens. What was I going to say? Oh, well, okay. What do you want to get out of this trip? Like, actually, this is the question. Did you feel like you had put a bit of pressure on yourself to complete that 200k run when you were doing it? Like, was there this thought in the back of your mind going, I need to do this, this is something I have to do at some point? And then, like, I guess you said you felt relief. Was it part of it, like, you kind of had, like, ticked it in some ways, or it doesn't feel like you've really ticked that box?
Yeah, no, it felt... like, how do I put this? I suppose, like, it's certainly relief. I'm grateful that I was able to kind of tick that box, whatever it was. But the box wasn't in relation to like a distance. It was more in a relation to just, I guess, maybe being on foil for that amount of time over that distance under those circumstances. Like, it was kind of more just seeing what, like, it was a box of seeing what was possible, not necessarily like those metrics, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but yeah, like, I am grateful that I did it, but I also just see it as like, okay, well, that's like just another rung on the ladder for me. That's a very long ladder.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's
kind of a never-ending ladder, I feel like, for
probably,
you in some ways.
Like, yeah, but I reckon it is for all of us. But, you know, and that's fine. And other priorities will move in and out, like, and that's kind of all part of it. But, like, yeah, I'm, like, super grateful that I got the opportunity to do it and experience it and see it and share it.
Yeah, well, thanks for chatting to us here and sharing. I know you said before we started that it's good to kind of answer all the questions here. So, yeah, do you want to answer some of the questions you've been asked?
Look, I think most of that was in relation to kind of gear, what I was carrying and all that sort of thing. So hopefully a lot of that has been covered. But obviously, any more questions, please feel free to shoot a message. I think the only other thing I wanted to kind of, and this kind of all plays into it, but this trip, like, really is a bit of a kind of proof of concept of, like, an actual foiling expedition. But I feel like we could be moving into a like an area where we might be like, I think foil expeditions fully, you know, self-supported, like, might be possible.
Yeah.
And I reckon that's, like, man, that excites me. Like, that is.
So what's your, like, concept? What's the brainchild for that? Like, what would you envision that being?
I think, oh man, there's so much kind of inspiration that it can sort of draw from. But, like, just imagine, you know, traveling to a particular country with all of your gear and going, all right, for this, I don't know, 600 miles over the next 2 weeks, or over, you know, whatever the distance is. Maybe it's a 2-day, you know, with it, you know, just being 30 Ks a day or something like that. Like, but to be able to kind of foil and then be fully self-sufficient, you know, sort out your own water, carry food, you know, carry your sleeping gear, like, to be able to kind of do that and just, like, man, that would just lead to some pretty epic, unique experiences. Like, I just think it could be one of the most amazing ways to visit or travel to a place.
Yeah.
And it's like a whole new sport.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild.
I guess, like, I feel like the reason that probably everyone travels is to go experience new things and see something unique that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
And, like, kind of take yourself a bit out of your comfort zone and learn some new things. So,
what better way to do it than incorporate the sport that you love?
Yeah, it's wicked.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for pushing the sport in that direction as well, for sure.
Happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. So we just talked briefly about, I'm sure we'll chat about this while we're up here. I'm going to try and make a bit of a video about this trip that we're doing as well, and we'll try to talk about some things that we've thought about and planned for and the preparation and everything. But do you want to just give a quick run through of how it's different doing it by yourself as opposed to when we've got 4 people? We were kind of just discussing beforehand that we all foil together basically, like, every day on the coast. So we're pretty familiar with how we foil. We're confident in the abilities of each other.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to just elaborate on that.
It's kind of one of those things. If like, we're all fortunate that we do foil so much together, and so when I say we foil together, you know, we can consistently do runs and keep each other, you know, in sight the entire time, you know, and that responsibility kind of falls to everyone, and that's pretty important in this instance. We're going to, like, some pretty remote locations, so it is really important that we kind of look out for each other in that way. But it's also really but it's a skill, and it's hard, and it's challenging, especially once conditions sort of, fall outside of normal parameters. So the main ways that we sort of achieve it really are, one, everyone's ideally of a similar skill set, generally on similar foils. And then we also kind of try to foil in a bit of a formation as well. So as funny as that sounds, so we're all natural footers, so we all want to be looking over our right shoulder, not our left shoulder, because it's just far less physically taxing. And then so we offset each foiler a certain distance behind, and that's just kind of our default sort of positioning, especially once conditions get really sizable.
Yeah.
And then that's the best way that we can kind of keep in contact with each other. And essentially, if one person comes down, either the others, cut very hard left and right to sort of stay within a ballpark of, so that person can paddle up or catch up.
Yeah.
But as soon as they sort of start potentially getting too far away, we basically all sit down.
Yeah, and just wait.
Sit down, paddles go up in the air, and basically wait for that person. So you can kind of see a bit of planning and sort of logistics going around it, but it's but if we can maintain that, then the safety profile goes through the roof. So and that's really important for this one.
And we'll try and do all these strategies, but I'm sure, like, while we're out there, we'll probably learn some things too about inevitably, like, what's the best thing to do in certain situations. But the number one thing, which like Reedie and the other guys have definitely said to me, is staying together. That's 100% the most important thing, and comes above probably anything else, really.
Yeah.
And then if we're all together, we can work out whatever happens, and it'll be sweet.
Yeah.
So I'm getting pretty excited.
Yeah.
Certainly have the right people on the team as well, which is cool. So
mate, everyone brings something special.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
Well, thanks for chatting, Reedie.
Pleasure, man.
I hope that if you were interested in Reedie's stories, we answered some of the questions. If you want to just chuck a comment down below, maybe it's a good place, and we can kind of answer some of the questions all in the same spot. So if similar people have similar questions, they can just read through and save a bit of time. But yeah, I think that's all worked out well. Cheers, Reedie.
Thanks, man.